Okay, so we've done cost, revenue, and then what we really want to get down to is profit. All right, which profit involves both the revenue function and the cost function. So it's sort of putting it all together. All right, so the profit, so revenue was the gross proceed from sales. Profit is the net. Right? I have my revenue generated from sales. I have the cost for my items. The difference between the revenue and the cost is profit. Right? So it's the amount of money left over from revenue after the cost has been subtracted away. With profit, you can have a loss, which means profit can come out negative, which means my revenue is less than my cost in that case. You can have a gain, which is what you want. You want to gain profit. And so that means profit is positive. In that case, my revenue, my sales, are bigger than my cost, right? I've exceeded my sales, have exceeded how much my cost is. Or you can break even, which we talked about at the end of the last video. That's when profit is zero. That's when revenue is exactly the same as cost. And that is the bare minimum of what you want to get to. You want, at the very least, you want to break even. Meaning my sales at the very least cover my cost. I'm not making any money, but I'm not going into debt. I'm not losing money. Alright? And so it's sort of what you want. It's the bare minimum of what you want to get to. So if you remember from the previous example in the last video, we want to find the profit function for my cell phone. So I'm going to write down my equations. So in the last video, we found that the revenue for my cell phones was 78x. My cost for my cell phones was 33x plus 3,600. We want to find profit. Well, profit is revenue minus cost. And you have to remember that. Profit is revenue minus cost. And then you have to be careful. Revenue is just going to be simply a price times an X value. Cost, though, there's more to it. There's the marginal cost per item, and then there's the fixed cost. And what I mean by be careful here, you notice how I put parentheses around my cost equation? Because I have to subtract both my costs. And so what you have to remember to do is to distribute that negative when you simplify. I have to subtract the marginal cost per item, and I have to subtract the fixed cost. And a common mistake students will make is they'll forget to do the distributive step. They'll subtract the X values, but then they'll leave the fixed cost positive. But I have to take away the fixed cost, right? I have to subtract that. And so make sure you're very careful here. And so my profit is 78 minus 33x, which is 45x, minus the 3,600. And again, the common mistake students will make is do a plus for that instead of a minus. So be very, very careful with the subtracting the cost part. You have to subtract the entire thing, so don't forget to distribute that negative. Right? You have to subtract both costs. All right, once we have that, though it's a simple equation, you just have to remember to be careful with your negative, then we use it. All right, how many phones must they produce and sell per day in order to make a daily profit? So their goal is to make a profit of 2,340. How many of these cheap burner phones do they need to sell in order to make that profit? All right, well, how many phones means I'm looking for the X value. They gave me the profit, 2,340, that's their goal. And so you take your profit equation, set it equal to your goal. 2,340 equals my 45x minus my 3,600, and solve for x. So again, move the cost over, and then divide by the 45. And so they need to sell 132 phones in order to make a profit of $2,340. Alright, so they have to sell that many phones per day. The next example is kind of going to put it all together. So it's sort of cost, revenue, profit, all put together in one problem. Alright, so we have Janice. She owns a donut shop. She calculates that she has a fixed cost. So cost probably to rent the space that she's selling her donuts is $360. Her marginal cost, well, each donut to make cost her 15 cents per donut, right, for the materials. She plans to sell her donuts for $75 a piece. Alright, X represents the number of donuts she sells. So question A and question B are just my revenue and my cost equation, which there's no work to be done. All of the information's been provided for me. I know all of my parts. My cost equation is my marginal cost, which is the 15 cents per donut, so 0.15x, plus the fixed cost, which is 360, right? So there's my cost equation. Then my revenue is the price times quantity. She's planning to sell her donuts for 75 cents. And so it's 0.75 times each donut times x. And so there's my revenue and my cost. So again, nothing to do there except for just remember where all the pieces go. Alright, the next one we're going to graph the revenue, and I'm just going to do a simple sketch. I'm not going to go into great detail, so it's just a simple sketch of my graph to see how, show you how they behave. So remember, x is the number of donuts. This is the dollar. Either cost or revenue, right? They're both in dollars. Only in the positive, right? I'm only going to make positive donuts, and I'm only going to have positive costs and positive revenue. And so they're both lines, so they both should be straight. And so I'm going to start with my cost equation. My cost equation, if I don't produce any donuts, she still has to pay her rent. And so for 0 donuts, it's still going to cost her $3.60. And so I'm just going to go up here and mark off $3.60 is the starting point, and then it's got a positive slope, so it should be moving up. But 0.15 is a very small slope, so it's increasing but very, very slowly. So there's my cost equation. Right. Then my revenue equation. My revenue equation starts at the origin, right? I don't get any revenue if I don't sell any donuts. So 0 donuts, 0 revenue. It's also a line, but 75 cents is a lot bigger than 15 cents. And so it's increasing, and it's increasing faster. So it should be steeper, which eventually means it's going to overtake my cost equation, which is what we want it to do, because that's when we generate profit. And so I'm going to draw this line, but it's moving up faster. And there's my revenue equation. And then this moment's what we're going to be looking for. That's the next one. Find the number of donuts that must be made and sold daily in order to break even. Well, that's what this point is. This is the break-even point. Alright, that's when revenue is equivalent to cost. And so we're going to solve that. So I'm going to solve it over here. I'm going to do my work over here for my break-even. So revenue equals cost. And so the revenue is 0.75x. Set equal to the cost, which is 0.15x plus 360, and then solve for the x. Alright, so 75 cents minus 15 cents comes out 60. So 6.6x equals 360 divided by the 0.6 divided by the 0.6, and that comes out to 600. And so she needs to produce 600 donuts to break even. So there's the location on the graph. There's my solve. And so to break even, she needs to make and sell 600 donuts to break even. Right, which again, her profit would be 0 at that case. She actually wants to go past that, but that's the very minimum she has to do. She has to sell 600 donuts every day to cover her cost. Alright, next one is asking for profit. So remember, profit is revenue minus cost. So you do have to remember that profit is my revenue equation minus my cost equation. And just make sure you're careful with revenue and cost. And so my revenue was my 0.75x minus my cost, which was 0.15x plus 360. Make sure you're careful with that negative. Remember to subtract the 15.15x and subtract the 360, and so my profit is 0.6x minus 360. Right. And there's my profit equation. Then we use it, right? Once we find profit, well, suppose her goal is to make $150 per day. How many donuts does she need to make and sell? So I know it's I know it's got to be past 600, because 600 is the break-even point. So it's got to go past. So at the very least, I know that. I know that I need to go beyond 600 to make my profit goal. Alright, so we need to find X, how many donuts, when profit is 150. Alright, so take my profit equation, 150, and set it equal to, so take 150, set it equal to my profit equation, and then solve for X. So again, these equations aren't tough. There's just a lot of little things that you kind of have to pay attention to. And then you have to be careful when you solve. Again, it's not hard to solve. You just have to be very careful. For example, careful when you distribute your negative here, and then just be careful when you're solving these. It's really easy to make a simple mistake. And so just watch what you're doing. Alright, so 510 divided by 600, so she has to sell 850 donuts. So if she sells 850 donuts, she'll cover her cost and make a profit of 150. Alright, so the next one is one to do on your own, and then we'll get into so we've done cost, revenue, and profit. Cost, revenue, and profit go together. Alright, so those are sort of business applications, and all of ours are linear. So cost, revenue, and profit go together. Cost is always my marginal cost times my number of items plus my fixed cost. Revenue is always the price for my number of items times how many I sell. And profit is the difference between revenue and cost. Right? And it's always dollars comes out. Number of items is my X value. Right? And then we're going to switch gears here in a little bit, and we're going to go to supply and demand, which are different applications. Right? And so those are more economic applications. So these are your business applications, profit, cost, revenue, which go together. Next, we're going to look at some economic applications which involve the supply and demand in the business or economy.